Now, meantime, investors are awaiting the most anticipated report of the whole earnings season just a couple hours from now. Nvidia, of course, whose shares are higher after yesterday's declines. They're still up about 2.25%. The street expecting another beat and raise, potentially a positive spin on that DeepSeek breakthrough and all of that. For more, we have Christina Partsinevelos here on set with me, along with D.A. Davidson's Gil Luria. Welcome to you both. Christina, there's, revenues, there's earnings, there's gross margins to look at. There's going to be his comments with John Fort later as well. And we just heard from Andy Jassy last hour, who basically reiterated that they have huge demand for Nvidia chips. And he said, basically, if we had more, we could do more.
So what are you telling me? You're telling me that the fundamental story is intact for Nvidia. But the problem is you look at the stock and people have been on the sidelines for the past 8 months. You raised gross margins are coming down. We know that. Management already warned. U.S. restrictions are a big overhang for guidance. And I think that's why you've seen, especially buy-side estimates, they've come down for the first time in 2 years to fall in line with consensus. So the big number would be guidance at $42 billion. That's what we're expecting. But you raised gross margins, U.S. exports, the air pocket going from the old iteration of the Hopper chip or architect to the new stuff, the Blackwell, and then the Blackwell Ultra, and then eventually the Rubin. So they're always going to have this transition period too. But overall, demand is still intact. I just think that there's questions more about CapEx monetization. Show me the money. You can't keep spending. And when do we hit this peak? And I think Gil probably knows that.
Is demand, inexhaustible or not? What do you think, Gil? The market now is kind of saying maybe they feel better about this than they did a day ago.
Well, I think Christina's spot on in her analysis. And how I would say it is, what they're going to report this quarter is going to be fantastic. The fourth quarter spend from the hyperscalers and the other large customers for Nvidia was a big jump up. And so this quarter's great, and likely that the first quarter of the fiscal year, they're already in the books in terms of what the hyperscalers and the other large customers are going to do. It's the other things Christina talked about that investors are concerned about. What kind of sanctions are we going to have on China? What did Jensen Huang promised President Trump when he visited the White House? How is Blackwell going to translate to gross margins over the next few quarters? And then finally, what Christina brought up, which is really the biggest overhang, is when are we going to see enough usage of AI to justify this massive build out that we've had? And if we don't see it this year, are we really going to build out as much next year?
Right.
That's the biggest overhang. And some of these questions are not questions that the company is going to answer today on the call.
Well, they can't answer some of them. When we talk about how consumers are using it, the enterprise, whether these... Gil, maybe that's one quick follow-up for you. What do you hear from the community? Can you get to the frontier now with less compute or no?
Well, in terms of the training, the pre-training, what we've learned is that you can't really scale to the moon. There's diminishing returns for the clusters. I think initially, a year ago, we probably believed that we're going to train on 100,000 GPUs and then 1 million GPUs and then 10 million GPUs, and we're going to get correspondingly better models. That is very clear that that's not the case, that the advancements in these models will be more incremental and will have little to do with the size of the cluster they're being trained on. So a big source of the excitement about the ramp of data centers has gone away. And then when you start talking about the models getting smaller and smaller and more efficient, that means that demand is going to have to rise a lot faster to require more compute. Well, and interestingly, a very important point that may have gotten missed in the DeepSeek conversations is when the models get small enough, they're not even going to be hosted in a data center. They're going to be hosted on a device, on an Apple device, on a PC, where there's not any Nvidia chips. So these are the type of things we're thinking about in terms of especially going into next year and the year after that.
And it's why we're watching stocks, Christina, like Vertiv and those who are all part of this gold rush, right? So it's going to be, for that trade, important, maybe what Nvidia says tonight, or maybe not. They might be unique in terms of where they sit.
Well, to Gil's point, then, if there's a peak for hardware, Nvidia is going to say, hey, we're still focusing on DGX Cloud. We have our cloud offerings, our software offerings. The run rate is going to increase for software. They're going to bring up robots, humanoids, all of these other avenues that may not affect the near term, but that's going to be their argument. In terms of just your question about compute, think of Grok 3, right? Elon Musk went from, they were originally going to use 100,000 GPUs, and then they doubled it to 200,000.
Really?
Yeah, so that was a big surprise when it first came out. So the necessary compute, the chips, the hardware is still needed in the short term, but I do believe it's going to be commoditized. And I say this because you pay for your monthly subscription, right?
It goes back and forth, but I will say this. I guess I pay for Grok because of maybe paying for Twitter or something, but that model with the 200,000, that model is definitely better than some of the others that are out there.
But not by that much, right? And so the reason why I bring it up is that they're commoditized, but the underlying foundation of all of them is still NVIDIA. And there's been no other comparison. You could say, oh, the ASIC chips or, these specifically programmed chips would fall into place. AMD so far behind, Gaudi 3 from Intel so far behind, but NVIDIA still has that stronghold, as well as CUDA, which would be the programmable language for developers to use.
Which is now, people say, kind of becoming more and more ingrained. Gil, quickly, I mean, not that you cover Vertiv, but what would you say to investors who are wondering if this is a chance to look, and Broadcom's down almost 20% from its highs?
We will continue to build data centers. Let's not forget, we were growing data center build out even before AI because we need them for cloud storage. So we will always be building data centers for storage. And in fact, the over build out that we've had over the last couple of years for AI will not go to waste, even if there aren't great applications for AI, because the hyperscalers will turn around and use those for storage. So for the other data center providers, it may be a little bit less of a concern. If you're making liquid cooling, there's a company called Modine that makes liquid cooling. Blackwell runs hot. If you don't cool it enough, it'll melt the wires. So if you're making liquid cooling for data centers, that's going to ramp up over the next few years, regardless of how NVIDIA does.